Thanks, Anne. I've got to say I'm a bit breathless after those two presentations. The content-rich doesn't begin to describe it. And but what we definitely agree with the principle of trying to get teaching, schools, better connected with small businesses throughout the UK. One of the things that we found, though, is talk can be quite cheap. So we are actively engaging in the opportunity areas. We are trying to find enterprise advisors right across the UK. And it's a difficult sell, but it's one that we're absolutely committed to. Before I go any further, I think it's worth saying a thank you to Warren for the invitation and his team. I know they're great advocates for the LEP network, and they constantly make sure that we are informed of your progress. But I have to say, we're one of these awkward characters. We're one of your critical friends. And in the past, we've been particularly critical about governance arrangements, but we can see real progress happening there. And so we're encouraged by that change. We're also very keen that you put the focus much more firmly on SMEs than I think we've seen in the past. And we can see real progress there. But there's a really big role for these organisations in the future, in our view. And the first area, I think the first two speakers have touched on very eloquently, which is the skills area, where we believe there's a massive amount that can be done. But probably this is an area that wouldn't come that easily from a small business organisation. We recognise that one of the biggest areas that need work is leadership and management skills within small businesses across the UK. So this is going to be a very important factor in bridging the productivity gap. The other thing that I think you're all aware of, in less than a week, we will have triggered Article 50, Brexit negotiations will have started. And we've been working on our analysis of what a good Brexit would look like, and it's clear that LEPs will play a really important part in that future. So, you know, I'll touch on that in a bit more detail in a few moments. One of the things I think that is worth mentioning is that in the post-Brexit world, the role of European structural funds will be changed completely. And it's how we transition from that world into a world where business support becomes much more a role for LEPs. And we believe you're absolutely the right organisations to drive that. We're wholeheartedly behind your role in that in the future. But what we're slightly concerned about is that at the moment there doesn't seem to be an acknowledgement that if you're going to take the 93% of businesses that export to the EU and encourage them to export to much more difficult markets, business support is going to be vitally important. They're not going to suddenly transform into experienced and skillful exporters. As far as productivity is concerned, I mentioned leadership and management, but there is a big role for staff training. I mean, one of the pieces of research that we did showed that technical skills, what we described as the mid-skills, were a serious problem post-Brexit. And if that gap isn't filled, or if there's some sort of cliff edge, then there is no readily available skills in the UK to fill it. So it will become increasingly urgent to address that problem. We also think that it might be worth pushing the ONS to make sure that you get data on businesses in your area that of all sizes. It's relatively easy to get big corporates, information about big corporates, or even, from Sherry's point of view, fast-growing businesses, but it's very difficult to get an accurate picture of all the businesses in your LEP areas. And we think, therefore, it's important that once you've identified clearly, you take a less passive role in dealing with that, I have to acknowledge, awkward bunch of SMEs out there, and you really take a lot of trouble over making sure you make those connections. So how is this going to be done? Well, one of the big areas that we have confidence in is growth hubs, and in a way, them becoming the general practitioner for the business organisations, that they know they can go there and have their, they may say that their sales lagging behind where they want them to be. They've got health and safety issues. They've got training issues. That's the first place where a sort of GP service can identify where those problems are and signpost them to useful assistance. And also, I think there's a big role for LEPs in assisting with the apprenticeship recruitment process. I think that's something that if you build up that role, that a lot of our businesses say they would trust you to do. Another couple of areas that I think are coming back are about procurement. We believe that procurement is a big area where this is both private and public sector, that LEPs can play an important part in bridging the gap between either the big corporates or the local government procurement role. So that's a way in which you can take some of the friction out of the system that we think LEPs are ideally placed to do. We put a lot of emphasis on the role of the small business champion, because as I said earlier, we believe that communications is absolutely vital. The government has backed this concept of the small business champion on every board. We think that person will become vitally important to win the hearts and minds of small businesses in their area. And finally, it's worth saying that we, over the last week, if you needed to be demonstrated, we've proven that when we have an issue, we can mobilise and we can work very, very effectively. You know, the national insurance was a major problem for us. We moved quickly, we mobilised opinion, and you saw the result. We can be powerful allies to LEPs up and down the country, so please use us. Thank you.
Thank you.